Hi, May. Thank you for joining me on the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. It's a pleasure to talk to you. I'm a massive fan of John Lennon, so to be speaking to somebody that he loved and was close to him in that period of time in his life is an honour.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
No worries, it's great. So last year you released a documentary, The Lost Weekend, a love story, which is 50 years after the relationship with John. How come you wanted to release it at that time?
You know, it when I started to make it really started back in like 6, 7 years earlier. But the thing was, I needed to, I wanted it out only because people misunderstood, had no idea what my time with John was about. They only thought what they've read, and so many people have come to me and they say, "Oh, I know everything about you," but they didn't know anything about me. They only read what they want to read and what other put out. So my story was being told by a million other people, but never of, but it was time that it had to come from me.
So it was a great documentary. I really enjoyed it. Uh,
Oh, I'm glad.
for the listeners, when did you first meet John and Yoko, and what was your first thoughts of them?
Well, I met them when I worked in the New York office of Apple in New York, and this was in December of 70, roughly around that time period, early. And and I saw them and I thought, well, they're exactly what I've seen on in the newspapers and in the ad. He was all scruffy and she was wearing the dark sweater, the black sweater, and they were just standing by the bank of elevators, if I remember. And I'm looking at them thinking, okay, but you could feel them, they were a force, you could feel that. So I just sort of said, okay, never mind. So my friends, we went upstairs, went to our offices. I get the phone call from one of the vice presidents, and they said, "Get up here now and see if they want anything." And I said, "Oh, okay." So they chose me. I go up there, and I went in and I said hi. And now they realize I'm the same girl that they saw in the elevator, but I wouldn't approach them. And I said, "Just want to know if you need anything." And they said, "No." I said, "Well, if you do need me, I'm on this extension." And he said, "Fine." And then a day goes by and I get a call from somebody else in the office. And he says, they're here to make two films and they need some people to work with them. And you're one of them. And I went, oh, okay. And that's how it started.
What was a typical day like for you working with John and Yoko?
Oh, that could run the gamut at this moment. I was just thinking it could run the gamut because I was working sometimes 24/7. It wasn't there wasn't a time. I would love to go home at times. I wanted to get out of there, but it wasn't always as easy. I got kept there for a lot longer than I wanted it to be. you know, so I was envious of people going home at 5 and 6 o'clock in the evening when I was still working and I would be up early. Yeah. So, the day could begin if we were on many different projects, whatever it was. They woke up at around 11. And that was and then it would go through the day. I mean, I just had a list. So it was never easy.
You started working as an assistant for them. What do you think is the reason they wanted you to work for them?
Maybe it was because I really was more just in the background, do my job, which I loved, um, and just not want to bother anybody, just get my work done. And I thought it was important because I wanted to learn more and more about my job more than anything else, all the different things that happen, all the like doing press or learning more about records and recordings and different, and the perks obviously came along with it. The perks were like, Dylan would come visit, or what was it, George was coming by, and then so you just see and then all of a sudden some of these actors that maybe the younger set and like yourself don't know who they are now, but back then it was like they were like the actors, really actors. You're talking about Fred Astaire, or you talk about Jack Palance. These amazing actors.
That's something I wanted to talk about. Obviously, the Beatles had like the fame they got was like unimaginable. Like it's not normal, really, is it? But when you'd walk the streets with John and go to restaurants and stuff, what was that like when you started dating?
When we started dating, it was, they'd been here for a while. So he had been here. So it wasn't as intense as it was in the beginning. And I was pretty happy about that. And we would just go out, and people in New York would leave him alone. In other places, it was not so simple, you know. But in New York, he got people got a chance to see him, and it was fine.
So the relationship started between you and John when Yoko asked you to start going out with him. What did you feel at that time?
I told her no. What are you, crazy? What would I want to go out with? I've been working for them for like 3 years at that moment. I wasn't interested. I know, you know somebody, and you're going, I don't want to get involved here. Please, I'm just happy to do my job and, forget about it. But she was persistent. And it was only after John started to pursue me himself that things made a turnaround. But I definitely was not interested.
When she first asked you, do you think she'd spoke to John about it at the time, or did she just, it was her own
I
idea?
think that it was her own idea, because
Really?
I asked John later. And she said, "Oh, I fixed it for you." And he goes, "Fixed what?" He goes, "So you can go out with May." And he goes, "Oh my God." And he just buried himself in his bedroom and wouldn't come out. And then because I had to ask him what his like. I wouldn't come out of my office. I said, "I don't want to see this man." So it's just like it was very awkward.
Yeah, I can imagine. So when did it start taking a turn and you started falling for him when he did pursue you?
Oh, it took a few weeks, and then he started pursuing me, and it's like we were in the middle of the mind game sessions. We were working on mind games together, so it was just me and him. And Yoko had finished her album prior and had done her stuff, and I was also working on her uh, publicity stuff. So I was setting up interviews and doing all that. And so getting her done. And then I was working at night, working with him on his stuff. So I was talking about 24/7. I was so tired. Um, so that's where it was. And it was somewhere, uh, it was somewhere in when we were working on mind games, and all this started to happen, and I'm like, oh God, no. And then we actually stopped recording, doing some of that stuff, just so that, because neither one of us didn't know where we were going.
Yeah, it must have been a very strange time. The thing is, as well, you were a fan of the Beatles when you were growing up as well. So was that
Oh
making it more
yeah,
surreal?
yes, it was very surreal, because I didn't know him as, John Lennon the Beatle. Now I was more John Lennon the person. So it was not the same. I sit down, we would have conversations, we talk about different things, we talked about music all the time. So it wasn't, here's this man, it's the Beatles. It wasn't even that. But I did ask him a couple of questions. I go, who made that mistake? I kept hearing this, and he'll look at me and go, why do you pick up my mistakes?
Did you when you'd be out in public, obviously he was a big figure, and then you'd be at home and it'd be private. Did you see a difference in him?
Well, he knew, working for him, he was fine on the outside. He knew how to deal with the press and the people, because there's got to be some barrier, up. But he was basically same person, but he was a little more guarded when he was out, because they come, some fans don't know when to stop.
Yeah, exactly. Did you ever experience that, like fans
Oh
being
yeah.
able to talk. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it was sort of like a little more frightening than I anticipated, because I was never put in that position. And now I was put in that position, and I'm like, oh no, I can't have this.
How was it for you when the relationship was put in the spotlight and was all over the press and stuff?
It was you know what? For John, he felt comfortability that we didn't have to hide about. We didn't have to hide it anymore. So it was good. It was fine.
What about you personally though? Like, was it?
I think for me, it was good that it was kind of funny. I just remembered one of the women Laurie, who worked at Apple in London, and she called me up. She goes, "What is this?" I said, "What do you mean?" She says, "You're on the front pages." I said, "What front pages? What are you talking about?" And she says, "You're on the front page of the Evening Standard." I said, "You're kidding." And I had no idea because I had not spoken to anybody about it. And she said, and to this day, I've never known who took that photo, have no idea where it came from. And it was on the front pages, and it just said, I think it was something to the point, is this Lennon's new girlfriend or whatever, something similar to that. And she said to me, she says, "I saw the newspaper on the stand, and she's walking by the newsstand. She did one of those, she's walking forward, and she looked over and she went, 'What?' And she walked backwards, and she just sort of stared at it going, 'Oh my God.' And then, everybody in the office was like, 'Did you see?'
That must have been a crazy time.
It was a crazy.
Yoko wasn't happy about it though, was she?
Well, she didn't want people to know we were
Yeah.
together. And I think it was more so that she could say, "Oh no, no, that's not true." She could say whatever. But John was eager to tell everyone.
Do you think she was kind of? I know she was very controlling over John. You can tell in the documentary with like the phone calls from Julian, which she didn't want him to receive and stuff. Did you notice? Did you see that firsthand even before you was dating him? How
Did I? I'm
controlling?
sorry.
Did you
I'm
see
sorry.
firsthand how controlling she could be?
Yes, I've seen the controlling side, but I never thought I would have to really deal with it in that
Yeah.
sense. Yeah.
So that photo you mentioned there that was on the front pages, was that when you was out drinking with like Harry Nilsson and Keith Moon and stuff? Was that not that one?
No, it was even before that. When the timing, in actuality, it was more around November, December in 73. So it was even way before that picture you're talking about. So I know which one you're talking about. It's way before, months before.
What about them drinking binges and stuff with us? Because you were the only sober one. What was those nights like for you?
You know, I was being sober, the more, whatever you want to call me, the put my feet on the ground as the most grounded. But I knew why John did it. He forgot that he was John Lennon the Beatle, for a lot of reasons. It's with his friends. He got a chance to see a lot of his friends.
Yeah.
But I, when he kept forgetting who he was, where he was, I try to protect him from that, because it wasn't the fact that he didn't have time, and to break the myth also, he wasn't on drugs. He wasn't. He just had a good time with the guys that he used to remember to go out and have a good drink and have a good time, and that's really what happened. But when you're out with Harry Nilsson, he escalates that to the next level. So it's not so much John. He was fine until Harry comes in, and then it's another story.
That's the point that John made. It was in the documentary actually. Like when he was younger in Liverpool, he'd do the same thing, but now because he's John Lennon the Beatle, it'd be all over the news and press and stuff.
Right. But and nobody followed him then, and now everybody's following him. But at the same time, um, I was protecting him from, because he was the new kid on the block when we were in LA. And
Yeah.
no one had seen him, out and about with other friends. And when you're out with Harry, um, you get, if you see his documentary, I remember watching, and I think it was Jimmy Webb who said, I was telling my wife, who said, I'm going out with Harry, and the first thing out of her mouth is, when are you coming back?
That sums it up
So
pretty well then.
that gives you an idea of how it went.
Yeah, yeah. So you mentioned in the documentary that was like John's most productive time though with his songs and recording and stuff like with Mind Games. I know that was a bit previous, but Mind Games are the rock and roll album. What was it like in the studio with John?
Loved it. I learned a lot. I learned watching how he enjoyed, he loved being in the studio. He would make sure the rules were, you come in, he doesn't care if you want to, smoke a joint. Back then, it was a big thing. He says he didn't want you to be out of your mind while you're doing a session. He's paying for the session. He felt you could do whatever you want after, but not during. He goes, it's hard enough. And he would say that, he goes, it's hard enough to get, a track down. If you're all out of it, I won't be able to, get that out of you. You won't be at your best. So all the musicians on any one of those sessions, every one of them knew. And afterwards, they could do whatever they want. He says, just during that time.
Did that go a
They
bit wrong?
respected him.
Did that go a bit wrong with the rock and roll album though at times with Phil Spector and stuff?
Oh, well, Phil Spector is another story. Half the album was done by Phil, and the other half was done by John. So if you really listen to it, you could tell the cleanness of how things went. Like, what was it? Ain't That a Shame? Ain't That a Shame? Or what was it? Stand By Me. Those were John's. He did those tracks, and you could tell the difference. Then when you go to the Phil Spector produced tracks, it gets a little sloppy because we went to the studio and he wouldn't tell us how many musicians were in. And I said, so we had our own engineers. We said to Phil, we really wanted our own engineer because he said, you got to let me have some control of whatever. And he said, fine, but I got to have my engineer. Thank God we did. And the first night, everybody's coming in going, Phil Spector session, Phil Spector session. And we're going, it's a setup of 8, but we ended up with 27.
Jesus.
So we had no idea who was there. And, it's amazing because the only thing we did know was that John got Hal Blaine, famous, drummer, and Jim Keltner. And then we had 2 basses, 3 guitarists, 3 electric, 3 acoustic. We had a whole session of horn players. We had piano players. I wouldn't call them just piano players. I mean, you had Barry Mann, who wrote all those great 60s hit, with Cynthia Wilde. You had who was it? Oh, in the early days, we had Leon Russell. They were part of the Wrecking Crew. So they were all part. And I'm like sitting there going, oh my God, all these people are in this room at the moment. And the guy counting off with his tambourine is Jeff Barry, another great songwriter, from the Brill Building, all that 60s, all those big hits.
You was with him when he wrote Whatever Gets You Through the Night. What was it like watching him writing a song?
That album is it's his only #1 single with a #1 album in his lifetime.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Walls and Bridges was his only #1 single and album. So he watching it was like we were watching cable because that was a new thing at that time, cable. So we're watching this guy, Reverend Ike, very flamboyant, very rich looking guys. And, you get a kick out of watching him. You go, let's see, what does he have to say, And he's saying, yeah, whatever you do, it's whatever gets you through the night. And John went, oh, I like those lines. And he would take his notepad and he'd start scribbling. Okay. And he put it back. and he just kept watching him and watching him, and then, and so he made a song out of just that, just that. It's whatever gets you through the night.
That's crazy, just from a line, and he just
Yeah,
does a song like that.
that also gives you an idea of how talented John was. You know he's talented, but you don't realize how talented till I see things like this that goes
Yeah,
along.
yeah, that's what I mean. You're seeing it up close, aren't you? Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Something I want to talk about is an iconic picture he took, actually, that I'm sure you wasn't. Well, in the documentary, you say you had to capture the moment with John and Paul, the last known photo of them two together. What was that day like?
Oh, it was after it was the day after the first recording session we did with Harry Nielsen when John was producing Harry, and Paul and Linda happened to drop by. And then that also became that night, the first night of also the last jam session he ever had with Paul, as you know, which John discussed and said in the documentary. Um, and then the next day he came over to the house where we were all staying in Los Angeles with, he brought over his kids and we were all there. And it's kind of funny to think back now, and this is like in 1974, the end of March doing this, So it was interesting. He came in and he goes, "Session's finished?" Because John never liked to just dilly-dally and keep going. He liked to I got it, let's move on. Let's do a jam. Let's do something so we can hang out, and that's what he was about. And I got a chance, me and Mal Evans, who was the Beatles roadie, we got a chance to play tambourine and on the last time, John and Paul jammed together. So I got into that one too.
Wasn't Stevie Wonder there as well?
Yeah, he had came in from a session. He was somewhere, and then he goes, "Oh, he heard they were in town." He came over.
You took another iconic photo the day John signed the Beatles' divorce papers. He was the last one to sign it as well, wasn't he? So, what was he like on
Yes,
that day?
everybody thought that he was going to be all um, upset. He wasn't. He knew this would be a new chapter in his life, and everybody did too. They needed to get rid of this chapter they were in as the Beatles to go in and form a new chapter where they can be happy and be taught. Because, like I said, a few weeks later, when we're back in New York, Paul and Linda came by and say, "Oh, we're doing a new album. We're going to do it in New Orleans," and it turns out to be, Venus and Mars. And John was thrilled. He's thinking, "Oh, love to go down to New Orleans," And just after Paul and Linda left a day or two later, he goes, "May, I got to ask you something." I go, "What?" I was busy working. He says, "What do you think if I wrote with Paul again?" So it wasn't like as if he didn't want to write with them, or it was just freed them of any obligations that was there that it wasn't necessary.
Yeah, exactly. He says that were a time in his life he wanted to move on, doesn't he? But it was good that they got close again, wasn't it?
Yeah, they got close. I mean, where we lived, I mean, every so often we all of a sudden the bell would ring and the doorman would go, there's a Paul and Linda downstairs." It was like, "Oh, okay, fine." And John would look at me and he goes, "What do you think?" I said, "Send him up. What are you kidding me? Send him up."
What was the conversation like? I know it was Paul was passing a message on from Yoko. Was it?
And that was the first time in LA. But when he was visiting us in New York, that did not happen. It
Yeah,
was only in LA.
the one where he took the photo. I mean, when he of them two together. That was that time, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was the photo, the last photo. That was during that time
What did?
uh, in LA. That was the first time he had seen Paul, and it was a message. John never knew that that. So when Paul came out to LA to give a message, he never knew that Yoko had called Paul.
Yeah,
So he was in the dark. I actually knew, but I wasn't going to say anything, only because it would get too complicated.
Yeah.
So I'd rather stay out of that one. And he said something. He told Paul, he goes, "No, I've moved on." So Paul said, "You sure?" He goes, "Yep, I'm gone. I've moved on."
I'm sure you were happy to hear that at the time, wasn't you?
Well, yeah, I actually said to John, I said, "Are you okay?" He goes, "Oh, absolutely." And then when we got back to we were in New York just prior to that, and Yoko had asked for a divorce, and I remember him coming back, and I said, "How do you feel now that she's asked for the divorce?" Because he came back to tell me, and he says, "I'm fine with it. I've moved on." So by the time Paul got in with that and not knowing, so it's like, it's like a series of things, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
and John was still saying, I've moved on.
What was that?
People have no idea.
Yeah, exactly. What was that chat like? I know, apart from the Yoko, them talking about the message Yoko passed on, what else were they talking about? Did it ever get any, like awkward, or was it just like the?
Not awkward. It was like two guys haven't seen each other in a while, catching up. What are you working on? What are you doing in New York? What are you doing here? That type of thing. So there was never one time saying, what should we do? What should we say? It's not like that. It was an afternoon spent at the house that we were all staying at. I mean, Ringo was there, Mal was there, Harry was there, Keith Moon. So there was a bunch of people, and it was just a good afternoon for everybody to hang out with everyone.
It does sound crazy. Does what was when was the last time you saw John?
I hadn't seen him now probably 1980 he died, but I would hear from him. But I think the time I saw him was probably the winter of 1978. But in 1980, he called me, and he called me from South Africa. And I said, "What are you doing there? Where are you?" And he goes, "Cape Town." And I said, "South Africa?" Like, "What are you doing there?" And he said, "Oh, Yoko's giving me this East meets West type of thing to do. You know how she gets into that." I said, "Oh," I said, "So how are you feeling?" He goes, "I'm good." And then we're talking, and he'll go, "Have you seen so and so? Have you seen Harold? That was his ex-lawyer. Have you seen?" He had fond memories of a lot of people, and he wasn't in touch with them anymore. So he wanted to know if they were okay. And I said, "Well, I talked to all these people, and they're fine. I'll pass on your regards." He goes, "Do." And I said, I just always wanted to be sure he was okay in whatever he was doing. And he says, that I'm trying to figure out how we can see each other. That's not easy. I said, "I know." I said, "You'll work it out." And that was
So
it.
you mentioned there December 1980 he died, and people who were there like around at the time remember where they were when John Lennon was killed. Can you remember where you were?
Oh, I was not far from the Dakota, because I was at a friend's house. She says, "I'm going to cook you a great dinner. I'm a great cook." Well, all these years I've never had the dinner because it happened during the time she was cooking. And I remember just after hearing the news, I ran home, and the phone was ringing, and it was from, Joan, who was Ringo's executive secretary. And she goes, "Give me the number of the hospital." And I said, "It's too late." And she starts screaming. She goes, "What's wrong with your bloody country?" She goes, "I got to go. I've got to tell everyone." And I said, "Yeah." So then hung up, and I sat there still in a daze, and I thought, who do I know that John and I spent time with? Because it was so new, not everybody would have known. So the person I knew living in the city was David Bowie, and I called him up. And I woke his assistant up, and Coco said, "Come down. I don't want you to be alone. I'm going to find David. He's out and about, on a date somewhere, but just come here. I don't want you to be alone." And she couldn't believe it. And David, she found him, and he came in, he was just like so taken aback. He says, I can't believe this.
Yeah.
So we spent the evening, the three of us, watching what was happening on telly.
Sad, innit? I didn't even know him, and it's still sad, like hearing that and stuff.
Yeah. So it was quite, I thought about all the different things that we were supposed to do. He called. He would also, even though I didn't see him, but we spoke to each other in that last year, and he would also contact. He saw friends of mine that he knew, and he would say, "How is she?" Or he would say, "How's our little friend?" In all cryptic terms, because they knew not to say anything. And they would say, "Oh, she's good." And then, once Yoko would walk by, conversation changed.
That's the thing in it, the controlling side of it.
Yeah.
So to end on a lighter note, looking back now, 50 years later, what is your happiest memory with John?
Well, you know what? There's quite a number of them, capturing John in the, swimming. He loved swimming. That was one of his favorite things. Him and Julian, his son. And, and the fact that he wanted me to sing Number Nine Dream because that's my voice on the song.
Yeah,
But lots of people have no idea that, that was me. They all, because in the official video, they have Yoko's face mouthing it, but it's my voice.
you you mentioned before we started you've got did you say it was a Beatles exhibition in August? Is that right?
Yeah, the International Beatle Week, which is in August, which is in Liverpool yearly. It's an annual thing. I'm going to be there. There's a lot of us. What was it? My friend Chris O'Dell, who is also, if anybody who's a Beatle world, they will know who Chris O'Dell is. Ken Womack, who wrote the book on Mal Evans. His daughter, Mal Evans' daughter, will be there, Julie. There'll be Ivor Davies, Jay Bergen, who wrote a book. He was our solicitor. No, well, what do you call? I guess so. He was would he be considered a barrister at this point? Because I know you have a two-tier, it'd probably be a barrister because he was our litigation lawyer during the Morris Levy case. So he wrote a book about what it was like to go against him. So it was all that. So there's a lot of us out there still. So we're all going to be in Liverpool. To come by, check us out. We're all going to be there.
It sounds good. So what else are you up to nowadays, and what else have you got planned for the future?
Well, right now I am in the States doing a gallery exhibition. I exhibit my about 35 pictures, limited edition photographs of John during that time that I was with him. People can't believe when they see it that it's the same guy because you're really seeing John through my eyes when you see it in print. And so they're limited edition. And I've been going around the country in different places, and it's been wonderful to meet people. And they all say, every one of them would say, I'm the biggest Beatle fans. I think if I had money, if it was a pound for each time somebody said that, I'd be pretty well off here. But it's lovely to meet the people, and it's lovely to be able to give them some understanding or burning question they needed answered. And during that time period that I was with him, so there was a lot of that. So I've done since last year. I only started this last year. I've done over 35 cities all around the country.
It still shows how big he is, like all the years after his death and his music and stuff, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, and if people want to see what I haven't done Europe yet because it's a little different to try and bring those over. So we have to get somebody else who has more of an expert. But my business partner and I we're working on it. And if anybody wants to see the photos that I have, and I do send out one of the prints. Of course, he convinced me, Scott. He convinced me to sell that one too for people, and also the contract It's they can go to rockartshow.com.
Okay, I'll leave a link underneath that, image
Yeah,
for that. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and that you could see it, and you could see all the photos. And if anybody's in the States, they can come and see the tour. They can come talk to me, and I have fun. I've met quite a number of people. They've traveled far to come see me, and I enjoy speaking to all of them. And I'm there the whole time. The only thing I can't do when I tell the people is I can't sign your stuff that you've brought previous because you're in a gallery. So the gallery owners don't, they like to not have you bring other stuff in.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine.
Especially I said I can't wait to come back. I miss being in the UK.
For like an American coming to England, what do you like about England? Out of curiosity.
You know what? I love the people. I love their way of thinking. They had a way of working that I enjoy. I know it's sometimes they go, oh no, no, it's the way you Americans. But I remember in Britain, people you go to Apple, and maybe it was new the way Apple, it was civilized. You got a cup of tea in the morning, and that was fine. Here it was like coffee. They want you to work immediately. Stop this. So it was a little more civilized on things that I enjoyed. And besides, I like all the crisp that I could get from all the different flavors. Chicken tastes like roasted chicken. I enjoyed all that stuff, and there were certain things I miss. And John used to get, even though he lived in America, we would order all those rag magazines so that on Monday, because we couldn't get it on the Sunday, we'd get it on the Monday, and he would go through them. News of the world, all of those papers, and he would just read them.
Did he miss England and Liverpool when he was over there?
I think he loved living in America, but he did miss some of the people that he grew up with. But he
Yeah, yeah,
definitely, yeah, but he loved America because it offered him more opportunities in music and stuff, and things
yeah,
like that.
definitely. Yeah, nice. Yeah,
And you got to come over.
I know exactly. It's a place I'd love to visit. New York. Is it as nice as it seems? Then.
Oh yeah, there's no other city like it. Let's
Yeah,
put it that way.
it looks
I've
like.
gone through now all the different cities. New York is definitely not, it's not on that same level there.
Well, like you say, you moved to LA with John. You've been like all over the world, and you go back to New York. So there must be something about it.
Well, we never, just so you know this, we never considered LA our home. It was only there to do our projects. When people would say, where do you live? We go, New York. We always used to say New York.
Really? Yeah.
So everything we did was always in New York. But we did the project of the rock and roll album. We started in LA because that's where Phil Spector lived. Strange. And then of course it turns out it was the projects that kept us there, not the fact. And we only lived in 4 places. We borrowed our couch surf to our lawyer's home. It was his place. We went to Lou Adler, the producer Lou Adler, who, his place, he loaned us his house. And I thank Andrew Oldham, the record producer, Andrew Oldham, who was manager and discover and producer of the Rolling Stones. So he got us that. Then we went to the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, and then Harry Nielsen rented the house out in Santa Monica. So we never owned anything.
He was a bit. I know it's a bit personal, but he was a bit struggling with money at the time, wasn't he, when the Beatles were splitting and stuff like that?
Well, it was all of them because, well, especially John, because he was living in America and everything was in the hands of the receivership in England. So everybody was put on the alert of, what do you call it? An allowance.
Allowance, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so everybody was put on the allowance and all until certain things got settled. And then everybody can get their stuff. And that's why it was important that the Beatle situation, the breakup, the divorce paper happened. Because then
Yeah,
it all came about.
yeah, yeah. So you've lived a crazy life, really, back in them years, must have. Like, no, like nobody's, not many people have experienced that, have they?
I would never have experienced that either. I would never have told you when I got my first job that I would have done this whirlwind type of situation. It would never have been there. So obviously the universe found something different for me.
Exactly, yeah. Well, like I say, mate, it was great to speak to you. Well,
Same
it was
here.
an honor to speak to you. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, it was nice speaking to you. Behind the Curtain, it's called, your
Yeah, it's a
show.
podcast. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I love it.
Thank
It's
you.
very
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
Uh,
So we'll talk again.
yeah, before you go, can I just show you a painting my brother did that he wanted me to show you when I told him I was
Oh,
interviewing?
okay. Yeah, absolutely.
He wants to get your thoughts on it, if you like it.
Okay. Oh, he did a good job.
Good, isn't it? Yeah, he painted that.
Yeah.
Like,
What did he use? What kind of a medium did he use to paint that?
oh, I'm not sure. I'm not up with that. I don't have a clue. But
He did a
yeah,
good job. He got the proportions right.
you do art yourself, don't you? Is that right?
Sorry?
You do a bit of art yourself.
No, I understand it, you know. Listen, I used to watch, I did enough. I understand a little bit of everything. I'm one of those, I'm a jack of all trades and a master of none. But John was such a great artist. I mean, you know, but when I look at a photograph or I listen to music, I can tell you, but that was my forte is music. I could tell you if the song could be a hit, could
Yeah.
be if it's off key. I could tell by hearing it. I can't play an instrument, although John tried to teach me how to play Ain't That a Shame on a guitar, but his mother taught him. And I said, don't think my pinky works so well because it's so thin. And I gave up. He said, no, try it. I said, I don't think so. So that was that. As he's also tried to teach me how to swim. That wasn't happening either.
That's the thing with like people like John. He was a brilliant musician, but he started drawing before he was a musician, didn't he? So he was always doing art and stuff.
Well, that's what you see in if you remember, if you're looking at my documentary, you see a lot of personal things that he drew. That was mine. And
Yeah, like
then,
the one of you on the cloud.
yes,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, it was just like I had no idea. All of a sudden, I see this, and he goes, "It's for you," you know. And I'm like, "Oh, all right." You know, I don't ask for it, and he used to draw these things for me, you know. So it was nice.
Yeah, definitely. Did you keep any of the stuff he ever drew for you and stuff? Did
I,
you? Yeah.
I have them.
I bet you treasure them. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I
What have you
have.
got that you can talk about? Have you got like, the drawings and stuff like that, and anything else?
You know, it's basically I got his clothes.
All
That
right.
he
Yeah.
left it. I got a few things, you know, here and there, bits and bob, you know.
Nice, nice. Yeah. Yeah. So nice one, mate. Yeah. Thank you for that. I hope you enjoyed it. I really did. So
Yeah, thank you. You're the new generation. I have
thank
to
you.
explain.
Thank you.
Yeah, I enjoyed speaking with you. Thank you so much.
No
And
worries.
I look forward to seeing you again.
Yeah, we'll definitely speak again. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.